dog here.
Why don't I have a dog? So it was real. It's not. I gotta-
So you just go to share screen on the Zoom.
She working stuff?
No. She retired a year ago.
Okay.
But, you know. So it's muted down session. Correct. Yeah. Four PM, and I appreciate everybody taking time to get together. Hopefully we won't take too much time, but last week I met with Don and the auditor and Councilman Wobser, and there was just some questions around kind of the flood mitigation money set aside, some questions around the overall flood mitigation and timeline and downtown recreation area with the phase 2 benching. So wanted to get everybody together just to make sure we were on the same page and everybody kind of knew the current status of everything. So first and foremost, I gotta remember how to do this.
Christina, could I insert something real quick for our benefit of everybody?
Yeah.
I just want you all to know the way the contracting process works. The administration and engineering and my office and Don, we each have kind of a different role and as the contracts roll through. And I'm typically the last signature. And what I have to attest to is that all the funds are in place to move forward. And in this particular situation, it was just a little bit of a hiccup because of the announcement and the application of the grant for $20 million that said, hey, we were looking at a potential long-term delay in flood mitigation that would impact all three projects is what was said on the news. And that participated me basically having a conversation with Don and Jeff and then ultimately with the four of us. And the idea was before we step forward into this, it was important that I knew from a fiscal officer point of view that should there be shortfalls in funding, that you folks knew there were other areas that funding might come from. And if there were going to be objections to that I was aware of them up front to see if we needed to move forward with some other questions. So this way information is more informational from that aspect. And that's what I'm looking for out of it. So everybody knew where it came from. So thank you. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, so to that end, just wanted to confirm from my perspective and from all indications from City Council, the City of Findlay is committed to flood mitigation and see that as a priority. The current flood mitigation money that has been set aside is for flood mitigation in general. Anything that comes up, we will evaluate and determine if we want to pay it out of that. For example, with the 6815, we said, let's just go ahead and take it out of the general fund to pay for that. But that these funds are set aside for flood mitigation. We haven't earmarked them for any specific aspect at this point in time. I know there was somebody who brought up, that was set aside just for basin maintenance. And that I don't believe that was anybody's intention. That is not the way that any of the legislation is written. And as we have discussed, there may be the potential for additional money to have to be appropriated into that, again, to help these projects continue to move forward. With the FEMA grants, that would not necessarily be necessary. And obviously trying to bring in some of those other funds is the priority at this point. Additionally, just again, wanted to clarify that the flood mitigation, but phase 2 benching and all the other projects, as well as the downtown recreation area, in some aspects, the delay from flood mitigation, though I hate to see it delayed because I want to see that move forward as quickly as possible, gives us a little bit of breathing room with the downtown recreation area design because we had seen such a delay in that process as well. So what I wanted to quickly share was with the flood mitigation funding, as was communicated in the letter to you guys all last week, obviously cost on everything has gone up. These are the cost estimates from the engineers that include escalations and contingencies. And so we do believe that these are conservative figures. This is what is being submitted to FEMA on the different flood projects is a request for $24 million. Right now, when we look at it with the funding that has been secured from the state, from the remaining county commissioner funds, there is the 73 million. So overall, there could be a shortfall of about the 24 million, which was expressed in the letter to you all. As I had shared at the last council meeting, Norfolk Southern has said that they're not providing any capital support to the project at this point in time, but they would reconsider again next year as part of their capital budget. We are submitting a letter to them and have had some conversations with them covering their soft costs. So as part of the project, they have a person on site for everything. The railroads are, very particular. So there's a lot of different aspects that they include in that project cost. And so we are requesting that for this year, at least, they would cover their soft costs, which would be approximately $2 million. So that is a joint letter coming from myself and the commissioners that would be hopefully going out this week.
Those numbers, Christina, are just for this year, not inflated, right?
No, they are projected. So all of the construction estimates include inflation to the period of time that they expect construction to occur. So as we look at phase 2 benching, as well as the downtown recreation area, I just wanted to provide a little bit of timeline as we look at these. So obviously, pre-2020 was primarily property acquisition, all those different things that have happened really since the 2007 flood. As we look 2021 to 2023, that was property acquisition as well as the design and engineering. So on the phase 2 benching, they have designs for the benching aspects. With the delay for 2024, obviously that's for the FEMA grant. We were pretty much ready to go out to bid. So the FEMA grant, securing that funding, we would expect that we'd be able to go out to bid in 2025. With the FEMA grant, we should know in June if we are kind of making it to that next round of kind of review and probably approval by the end of the year. So that is what they have indicated, is you'll pretty well know one way or the other if you're moving on, and the high likelihood that you would receive the grant in June. At that point in time, that obviously kind of would allow us to kind of reevaluate. So with that, though, one of the positives is that with it looking at 2024 with the downtown recreation area, that gives us the time that we really needed to go through and do the community engagement as well as start the engineering and set us up for design work in 2025. Because as we've said from the start, there's a couple of key components, especially within the downtown recreation area. For example, the pedestrian bridge, that depending on where it's located within the project has a significant impact on the phase 2 benching. So we've been kind of talking to them and said preliminarily, yes, we want to move that bridge. It's an obstruction in the hydraulic improvements. It makes more sense to move it farther east, closer to MLK, because then you're able to shape the curvature. It's going to provide more benefit. But because we don't have the specific design for the bridge, we don't know how the dirt needs to be moved in that area to accommodate that design. So some of the delay caused by the FEMA grants, going after the FEMA grant, actually is helpful to us because it gives us the time needed so that we're hopefully not moving dirt twice. So then we would expect that in 2024, we would be able to, by the end of the year, start the engineering and design process. It's going to take 12 to 18 months to do the design and engineering. And then we would expect that hopefully in early 2026, we would be able to bid out the downtown recreation area. And then there may be some overlapping construction again, of some of those certain elements. Hopefully that would, we'd be able to align those. And then construction be completed in 2027 for the downtown recreation area. That additionally gives us the opportunity to submitted the capital and the strategic fund request with the state of Ohio with Senator McCauley. And we've made that request. There's other programs through state and federal government for specific park improvements. And because this is that flood benefit area as well, that helps us rate higher on the projects, having them be green space. So one thing, I keep forgetting that one thing that I think is important, so I don't think I've said anything that should be a surprise to anybody. But one thing that I want to share in just a minute is I think when have been a little bit confused when we say, you know, a $10 to $40 million park. I think that there is a perception that the $40 million park is what's shown here. And that's not necessarily the case, because the $10 to $40 million is a range if we complete all elements shown in the conceptual drawings, but based off of a low-end construction or high-end construction. And there's so many different elements that can go into that, right? I keep using the example of sidewalks. You know, you can do asphalt, you can do concrete, you could do marble. There are different price points for each of those options. And so I thought it was helpful, because I know I shared it in the past, but it's not been, you know, widely kind of publicized, is the estimates on the project cost are showing, okay, if you do all of the elements in the concepts with a 30% contingency, escalated for, at that point, 2024 construction, the range. So for example, the pedestrian bridge, you know, we said signature bridge, that can be $2 million, or it can be close to $9 million. So those are the elements that we have to work through the process to refine. Additionally, through the process with the public, being able to have them prioritize what are the elements that are most important, right? Most everybody's going to say we want sidewalks, we want bicycle paths. Then I think we're going to probably hear from a lot of the families, especially they want the splash pad or some sort of outdoor, you know, kind of family amenity. Those are definitely top ones, and then playgrounds. But then we're going to start getting into some of the things. Okay, this maybe the dog park doesn't make sense, or the Peace Garden area, you know, with those little, some of those different elements may not make sense. And so part of the engineering moving forward with that allows us to help refine that, as well as then take those different elements to donors that may be interested in supporting a specific aspect of it. So I think for today's conversation, as the auditor stated, he just wanted to be, you know, make sure everybody was aware that we're all prioritizing flood mitigation. We recognize that there are lots of moving pieces in this, and that the city is, when necessary, willing to put additional funds towards some of the projects. And so I think that that's something that we've all been on the same page. We recognize that we can do both of these at the same time. The good thing about engineering designs, they don't go bad. So as we work through the process and we have that, we can certainly, if we need to, delay. Now, I feel like we're in a good spot, and we're definitely going to be able to move forward. But as we've said, if we need to phase in some of these elements as well, we have the designs, we have the plan, and we can do that. So we'll continue to kind of move through, but I just wanted to kind of give the quick update, because I know there's been a lot of moving pieces, and make sure we were all on the same page, that we understand the flood money we've set aside will get us hopefully far, but that as necessary, we may need to have to contribute some additional funds. Yeah, thanks.
You say this, obviously there's a high end and a low end of the budget. Who's the one that's in charge of making the final decisions?
Yeah, so there's going to be, depending on each element, some of it might just be Jeremy and I saying, yeah, we're good with the concrete, because for maintenance or whatever, our guys can do, you know, we'll probably have some of that. On the larger components, our goal is that there would be discussions with Parks and Recreation Committee, that we may do some engagement with the schools, but we have to be able to kind of wrap our arms around those a little bit, because we'll probably be kind of the first line of review, because if they present something that's wild and there's no way we're going to do it, or there would be a major concern, we don't want to present that to the public. So it'll kind of go through multiple layers, but then ultimately, once we get to the construction, it'll probably be discussed at Parks and Recreation. Appropriations Council as a whole would have to be approving each kind of throughout the process to appropriate the funds.
So council would have a role in some of that decision.
Yeah, definitely.
Christina?
Yeah.
You don't have a slide there outlining the costs should this grant not come through. So let's presume, for the sake of this discussion, we don't get the FEMA grant. How do you anticipate, where do you anticipate the monies to come from to move forward with phase 2 benching, as because that's the topic of conversation that I'm most interested in today. And then you can touch on Norfolk Southern and Eagle Creek if you like, but where do you see and how much do you see coming from where? That would be helpful.
Yeah, so phase two benching, the commissioners have stated that is their priority. They currently have $6 million remaining. So they would be able to cover the majority of that cost, if not all. And then obviously we have the $2.5 million set aside, so we would be able to cover any shortfall.
Now, they're telling us two different numbers then, because they're telling me 4 to 4.5 is what they have.
Well, per Steve Wilson, who has been managing the finances and sending me their spreadsheet, they have $6 million.
I got it from commissioners. So we've got about.
Okay, well, either way, the commissioners have stated that's their priority project, so I would anticipate it being a combination of the city and county.
Where are we on the properties that we were gonna, that are delayed, that we were going to acquire from the county with the environmentals? Because I know we keep running into more hiccups on the environmental. Where's that money gonna come from to deal with any of those? Is that coming out of the 6 million for their benching, since most of it's in the benching area? Or are we going to be partnering on any of that, or do you expect to get brownfield grants for all of it?
So I believe what you're asking is, okay, the commissioners are covering the remediation efforts on the properties that they currently own within the downtown recreation and phase two benching footprint. Is the short answer to your question. They are handling that. That is coming out of the $6 million that they currently have on hand. They had already received a brownfield grant for the Rain property. I don't believe that the underground storage tank that they discovered is any, huge. They're not doing a brownfield grant for that. And as previously stated, at our appropriations committee meeting where we went over the environmentals for the entire area, we do plan to submit a brownfield remediation grant for the entire down phase two benching. Obviously that cost would not be necessary if we got the FEMA grant, because the FEMA grant would cover that aspect of it. However, we do still plan till we hear from them to move forward with the brownfield remediation grant. So that would decrease the $6 million cost estimate for that project.
What's the timeline on applying for that grant and how much?
I don't, well, the specific, there's kind of 2 rounds. So you can apply in April or you can apply in, I think, September, October. So my guess would be that we would wait until September, October, since we would then kind of have a better timeline on if we're getting a FEMA grant or not. So we won't need to apply. What was the second part of your question?
How much money are you asking?
Well, we have a county set aside of $1 million. So I was thinking that we had discussed just applying for the full amount to use towards that.
The money you applied for, what, a month ago, the John Cross dollars of potential for the park, is that null and void now? Is that still an option? Because that's I can't remember what you applied for.
Yeah, so I submitted a request for $10 million to the state one-time strategic funds. That is being handled by the House and Senate. It has to be approved by both. That is still being considered. The Senate, who I applied to most recently, does not plan to approve any of the $700 million until after the election, probably April timeframe. So that's still an option.
So it's still out there
Yes.
as a feasible option.
Yep.
But that's all park dollars,
Correct.
nothing with flood on that. And then when you were showing the park project on the low side to the high side, and then you said it's been, that it's delayed, it's giving us an opportunity, which I think is great. I guess for me, we need to keep remembering we're doing the design on the high side, which if we go on the low side, we are spending dollars we didn't need to spend in design. So my question being, since we have that delay, do we have an opportunity before we move forward to do similar to like what we did for the Blanchard bike path and things like that, where we had the night in council chambers and got everybody's feedback before we decide how far we're going on the on the design.
So I think what you're asking is, the current appropriation that has been set aside, is it too much based
It's a
off
third.
of? So I want to provide some clarification. So we set aside $1.5 million, and that was an amount that we had discussed and actually provided an additional amount of cash that was not needed under the contract, because it was desired that we start setting aside money to put towards the project's construction, not just the design aspect. The design cost estimate is based off of a range. So typically for projects, the kind of soft cost, the engineering components are about 10% of the overall project cost. The contract is written stating that it's an up to 1.257 or something of that number, and is paid out based off of services actually provided. And the contract is for about the 30%, which is typically, even it's a little bit of a misnomer, because 30% designs are actually really the bulk of designs. That final, 70% is all the kind of more details. So in my opinion, I want to just provide that clarification. No, I think it's good that we set aside the money. I think as we move through the process, we're only going to appropriate what is actually for work actually done. If we very quickly in the community engagement process realize that we are not doing a signature bridge that's $9 million, the engineering associated with doing that is going to be less. It's going to be a little easier to design certain levels of bridge than others. So no, I think that we have to work with them to refine the elements that then allow us to continue to move forward. I don't think that pausing and trying to work with the public to decide the details at this point in time is really saving us money in any way. Because again, the contract is written in such a manner where we're paying them based off of work performed. And I know that the auditor has brought up concerns that he doesn't feel like it's clear enough that the funds can be utilized for work beyond the 30%. But in my opinion, I know Assistant Law Director Feigner reviewed it and said it's all very standard language. There was no concerns. It's written saying, these are the work we're going to perform. But again, we're only paying out for the work that they perform that we authorized.
Excuse me, I want to clarify that a little bit, because I had the contract in front of me and I read through it again today. Their scope of services is very clear. There's 13 items in that scope of service, everything from engaging the services of a bridge architect, park architects, how they're going to communicate, what they're going to do with regard to the amphitheater and all the different components. And it says under compensation, the owner shall compensate the engineer for scope of services a lump sum of $1,240,000. There's no accommodation in this agreement at all for changing the scope or controlling it unless we change the terms of this agreement.
No, so if you continue to read in the agreement, it's closer to the end
Sure.
where it talks about the actual invoicing. And I did ask Assistant Law Director Feigner about that because I thought the language was kind of weird. And I know Jeremy also compared it to some of our other contracts, that is standard structure of the contract. But when you talk about the actual payments being made, it's based off of invoice and actual work performed.
But that is contradictory. We're going to have to clarify that language because the line, if we're sitting in court and disputing this, it says the owner shall compensate the engineer a scope of services a lump sum of $1,240,000. And there's nothing else. There's no other contingencies to that. So from my perspective as your fiscal officer, I'm being instructed here that that's what I have to pay. I don't pay less, I don't pay more. That's what I pay. So I definitely want this contract rewritten to reflect that if that's true, it's supposed to happen.
Can you go to the next to last page? I
Yeah, I
believe I
just
don't
did.
have it in front of me where it talks about the invoicing process.
This is, but I'm saying it's contradictory. This is where it says the amount of money that's due, it's saying it's a lump sum due. Regardless how they invoice, this says it's lump sum due. So I want from a fiscal perspective, regardless of the contractual duties they're doing, I want that clarified so that there isn't ambiguity between the two sections of the agreement.
Very good. I'll get a letter from the company.
I suppose I would say from my perspective, if our law director is saying it's great,
Our law
It's the
director
standard.
did, he did, the assistant law director
well,
did.
who
And I'll go by
it comes from the
Tom
same
first.
office, okay?
No, that's not good enough. I have a fiduciary responsibility and I am personally liable. The day you're personally liable, you can sit here and make these decisions. With all respect, the state puts a level of liability in a statutory city on the law director and on the auditor that are different than what they put on each of you. So, and that's the way it's going to be.
So I think for today's conversation, I'll work with the auditor to get a letter from Strand that further clarifies and or something from the law director stating that we're kosher. We just wanted to make sure everybody understood that, you know, flood mitigation continues to move forward. The funding structure is, you know, kind of up in the air, but that we want to move forward with that and that we are good with moving forward with downtown recreation area. So obviously, just wanted to inform you all of that. Hopefully that gives the auditor what he needs, given that the legislation has passed, the funds have been appropriated from the full process. The auditor Stashak, you should be then good to sign the contract based off of council having passed the legislation. and
The only
appropriating the
question I
funds.
have for this group is, so basically, what I mentioned to Councilman Moser, because of where you're at with funding and the additional costs that we're seeing out there for whatever reason, the perspective here is, and it's important that you all are aware of what we're talking about, is should these grant funds not come in, you're looking at probably in this case, if what the commissioners are telling me, their balance is $4.5 million that they have set aside for benching, less some environmental work that's come up in the meantime. So let's say they have 4 million, not 6. So if they indeed only have 4 million put towards phase 2, you've got 2.5 million sitting in your flood fund that we moved over in 2023. So that's 6.5. You could be talking about obligating that entire amount of money towards this project to get it to where you want it from the benching perspective. That's setting aside just the nothing towards the park at this point. Should you just do that? So my question for this group was, and what I had told the mayor was, I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. That you guys may be looking at taking everything that you've set aside already, putting it towards this, and we're moving forward. And if anybody had any questions about that, I need to hear those before we move forward as well.
From my perspective, the answer would be hell yes. If we have to eat a little bit of that cost up front, we'll recoup it later.
My,
I don't want to hold or vote because of it being committed at home. My issue was that people have questions or concerns to express.
So we just wanted to confirm,
Sorry,
you know,
interrupted.
that everybody understood that the flood money is still for the purposes of flood mitigation. And that could include putting money towards the downtown
To me, that's the most
phase
important.
phase 2 benching.
Is getting the budget completed.
and I would agree with Randy that number one for me is finishing this flood project out. We're too close to the end of the project. And then my concern of moving forward with this appropriation being signed on the park situation, there's a lot of moving pieces with flood and a lot of money that's unknown. And I just don't think it's fiscally responsible for us to sign that contract yet. I would like to see public engagement take place that might help us figure some things out. And then you guys, the auditor and the law director can figure out wording on this contract. But if we end up having to help out more than what we're expecting to do with flooding, I think that's gonna impact what this park is gonna look like. Plus, we have the environmentals going on. There's just, for me, I think we need to stop and we need to pause. And we need to, if it's only till June, to know first if you're gonna get flood dollars, FEMA dollars moving forward. And then the money that you applied for a grant, that was June as well. or no?
From the state, we should probably have an idea in April, May. So I understand and I definitely agree, you know, causes a little anxiety, but I think the big thing to keep in mind is that every time we cause a delay with the design process, it's going to cost us more money in the long run. It's going to leave money on the table through different grant opportunities. It's, you know, I think that there are a lot of moving pieces, and that's why I reiterated right at the beginning. Flood mitigation is definitely the priority. The runway on the downtown recreation area amenities is extremely long. That I think that if we keep stalling out on the process, we're gonna miss the state funds. We're gonna miss private donors.
We're paused anyway, right? I mean,
No,
we
we need to work through.
we can't proceed with the park before flood mitigation's done. We can't proceed with the park before our environmental issues are all taken care of to a standard that is safe for kids and families and folks to be down there. So we are delayed. And then to me, a couple months more to know that your dollars are coming in and we don't have anything else happening in the city that changes our financial picture when we're looking at spending millions of dollars potentially supporting the county on flood plus the park. So that's
Well,
where
and
I'll
that's
leave
one
it
of the
at. I
reasons
don't-
though, with the downtown recreation area. The designs, engineering documents don't go bad, right? So we can work through the process of getting the plans together so that we can then, even if we say, okay, we wait another year as we put money towards flood mitigation and then we raise private dollars or we do these things. So I think anytime, it's gonna take time to do both of these things and we can do them both at the same time and do them both responsibly and work through the environment. That's what we've been doing the past year, is that pause to make sure that we had more of the pieces of the puzzle and had more knowns as we move forward.
I just think we cannot continue pausing and moving the goalpost in the pursuit of doing big things at the command of small perspectives. We have to keep on in that regard.
Anybody else that had significant concerns with them, you know, the money is set aside for flood mitigation. We recognize that will be used for flood mitigation at whatever level, prioritizing phase 2 benching and that additional funds may be necessary as we move forward. Okay, very good,
I don't have any concerns.
very good.
Moving forward. Otherwise, we can sit here for another year.
While costs go up.
All right, perfect.
Any other questions? All right, with that, we'll call this meeting to close.
Thanks, everybody.
Two.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you
Have a
for
good
coming
rest of
in
your
on
Monday.
short notice.
Thank you for the update.